Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to do a deep dive first look at Skies Above Britain from Jerry White and Gina Willis and published by GMT Games. In this game, you take charge of either a squadron of Hurricanes or Spitfires and fight in the skies above England in the Battle of Britain in World War II. As we start out, it's worth mentioning that this is the third game in a series per se. Skies Above Britain follows Skies Above the Reich and Storm Above the Reich, where you're playing German fighters trying to shoot down heavily armored US bombers over Germany in the Allied bombing campaign of Germany. This game, of course, Skies Above Britain, is the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940, so July through October of 1940. You control Spitfires and Hurricanes, and the gameplay is very different because the bombers themselves, the German bombers, are lightly armored and relatively easy to shoot down, but getting to them through the Messerschmitt 109s and Messerschmitt 110s is much more challenging. So there's a lot more fighter versus fighter action before you get to the bombers in this game. Before we jump into the details, I want to mention this video is sponsored by our new channel sponsor, Noble Knight Games. If you're looking to buy Skies Above Britain or Skies Above the Reich or Storm Above the Reich, that might be a good place to check. They often have GMT games and a wide array of GMT games and other war games at very competitive prices. They also have, in addition, if you're looking for some kind of a bargain deal, sometimes they have used copies of games available as well. So sometimes you can save some money that way. They have a wide array of other types of games. I've been very happy with their service. So by all means, feel free to check them out if you're looking to make a wargaming or board gaming purchase. And links are down below in the description. Let's take a look at the backside. Unit scale gives us some information on gameplay as well. So the unit scale is individual fighters. So you're going to be in charge of a squadron of planes, 20 planes. You're going to be sending up a dozen at a time. You're going to have pilots, you're going to have names, and they're going to have history and a story. And I think that's one thing to highlight is the potential for this game to spawn narrative, because you're going to be talking about the lives of individual pilots. You're going to lose some are going to become aces, and it's just going to have this kind of amazing narrative as you play through one of these campaigns in the game. And we'll talk more about the campaigns as we go through here, but the time scale, each turn is seconds and minutes. And that's, I think, talking about the patrols that are in the game. So the patrol level is a matter of minutes rather than hours, but it's also important to note that the heart of this game really are the campaigns. There are 4 of them. They span a month, and you can link them together, extending out your gameplay over sequences of missions that have legacy elements. So your pilots are going to gain experience and carry that over to the next mission, or be fatigued, or KIA, and which you're going to get replacements in. So it's really the history of your squadron over the Battle of Britain, which is really, I think, where this gameplay and this game system is really noteworthy. So map scale is listed here as area movement. It's got kind of charts and diagrams that you're going to be showing where the planes are situated in the battle, but there is no hex grid here. So it's all done through kind of area movement and moving through different zones on this map, as we'll take a look when we get there. Players, of course, is 1. This is a solitaire game. You could play it cooperatively, of course, for sure. You could probably each take charge of half a squadron and things like that. So I'm sure there's creative ways to play it cooperatively. The time scale here says 2+ hours. I feel like this is a little bit, I mean, it's the best they could probably do, right? But an individual mission could be an individual patrol, which is the heart of the game too, in terms of the unit that you're dealing with, could be and should be probably a lot shorter than 2 hours. But a campaign can go 14, 15, 20 hours long, because you're stringing together a number of missions. Complexity here is a 5 out of 10. Looking through the rules, reading through the rules, this feels about right. It's not so much that the systems are complex, it's just that there are a number of systems here. We'll talk about that as we look at the rule book. Solitaire suitability says 9 out of 9. I would give it a 10 out of 10 on my scale. Complexity is a 5 out of 9. I'd give it a 5 out of 10 on my scale. Let's open it up and take a look at what's inside. There is a lot of documentation here. We've got a 62-page rule book that we'll look through, but this is best talked about, I think, in context here of the situation manual, which is also 52 pages, and then we have some optional rules. We'll take a quick look at those too. But I want to talk really about the rule book and the situation manual hand in hand. First, some general comments about the rules. I think there's 2 things that we want to talk about them in a large scale, but just some general comments on the design and layout of this rulebook and the materials that you get. It's absolutely fantastic. Really well explained. The text is really clear. Graphics highlighting everything. Section headers broken up. It's easy to find the larger sections. Just really, really nicely done. But more so than the organization of the rulebook, I think what is really unique about this game is the way they handle the complexity of the game and introducing the player player to all the different systems in the game. So there really are kind of, if you would, almost like 5 different sequences and ways that you need, things that you need to learn how to play this game. First of all, dogfights are the smallest unit. So fighter versus fighter coming together. Then the bombers, how you're going to attack the bombers as the British, and that's the second cycle. Then how you're going to find the bombers in the interception sequence, and whether you're going to get intercepted by escorts and all these kinds of things. And each one of these systems, the dogfight cycle, the bomber cycle, the interception cycle, are almost mini games within themselves. And then you've got the idea of how you're going to put all of these all together. So your patrol kind of element. And then lastly, you've got the idea of the entire campaign, which is stitching together patrols and managing your squadron in between the different patrols that stretch out over the kind of the campaign length. Now, the cool thing about this, right, is that you don't have to read all the rules to play the game. This is programmed instruction. So the way they teach you to learn is to read the introduction, read the dogfight cycle, then we go over to the situation manual, and we can see that we've got this all lined up by the chunks of the game, if you would. Dogfight scenarios, bomber scenarios, intercept scenarios, a patrol example which puts all of these 3 things together, and then the campaigns, how to manage those. So you don't learn everything at once. You read the dogfight cycle rules, which are relatively modest. Each one of the sections isn't really that long if we look at them in here. I mean, this does get at that kind of the complexity. There are mini games within themselves. But the dogfight rules go from page 6 up to page 17, 10 pages, and again, with a lot of graphics to really help out. So it's not officially 10 pages per se. It's much shorter in terms of the information, because the graphics are filling up so much space. So you read that those 10 pages of rules, and then you come over here to the situation manual, which gives you your dogfight scenarios. So once you read those rules, you play this. You can play through scenario 1, flyby, scenario 2, tailed, so it's teaching you something else. And each one of these scenarios is leveling up what you understand about dogfights and how you use them. So this is now you're on their tail rather than being tailed, so it adds another learning element to them. RAF advantage, so it's talking about advantage as you're coming into dogfights and things like that, and then Luftwaffe advantage, so you get these 5 different elements here. Then you lather, rinse, repeat. You read all the rules for the bomber cycle, which go for about 7 or 8 pages, and then you're going to come and play these bomber scenarios. So you get the idea. So this is, I love this type of systems in games because you're playing as you're learning. It makes the learning fun, and everything we know about how people learn things is you can't just dump everything on them at once. If you break it down into what we call manageable chunks, it makes the learning so much easier to retain, so much more enjoyable as you're going through it, and so much faster to get up to speed with the whole element. So I really like this system and the rule book and the way they set this out. This is absolutely marvelous. It's taking what is legitimately a level 5 complexity game and making the learning experience a play experience and making it fun. And then we go through all of the scenarios in here until we get to the end. So we've got the different types of scenarios, and then we get the campaigns here, which again I think are really the heart of the game. And there's 4 campaigns, each one spanning I think roughly 1 month of the Battle of the Britons, starting on the 10th of July there. And they're all different. They have little variations and kind of elements that make them a little bit nuanced from each other, and there's 4 of those. And of course the idea here is that you can string them all together, which would create roughly a 28 mission campaign, and I think 28 patrol campaign, if you would, which is going to give you probably about 14 to 28 hours of gameplay when you're all said and done, depending on how quickly you play. So tons of content in here. Let's take a look now at the optional rules. These are fairly evident in terms of confirmed kills, some different things that can happen in here. But there is one here that caught my eye that looks really cool. It's called this RAF tie-in guide. Now, if you're not familiar with RAF, it's a game made by Decision Games. It's a solitaire game where you conduct on an operational level the entire Battle of Britain. And so this is how the designers have speculated that you could take this game and play one of the squadron's missions out as you're playing that larger RAF guide. It's more kind of a guidance on how you might do that, but how cool would that be? That would be an epic gaming experience. So you're playing the entire Battle of Britain on the operational level and then playing the story of your squadron as you're dovetailing back and forth between the 2 games. Really cool. Another fine touch in here too that they make note of, and we'll take a look at it later, is that they also give you the pilot rosters for actual pilots that fought in the Battle of Britain, and we'll take a look at those player aids as we get there. I thought this was pretty cool too. All right, let's jump in now and take a look at the counters. First of all, there are blocks in the games for your fighters. So we can see here, we're going to stick these on and take a look at these. These are really colorful, nicely done. And it's worth mentioning, for the British, you're going to either have a squadron of Hurricanes or a squadron of Spitfires. You have a choice as to which one of those two you're going to play for your campaigns and your patrols and things like that. So both of those aircraft modeled in the game. Now we come into the counters themselves. There are 4 counter sheets. Many of them are, because the blocks are controlling like your British fighters, and we'll talk about how those are there. Many of them are controlling, of course, the German bombers here. And there are 4 types. We have Heinkels here, and then we have Stukas, and then we have Junkers bombers, and then Dornier as well. So 4 different types of German bombers that are present in the game, and all have different characteristics and different elements and different strengths and weaknesses, of course. So those are modeled on these. And these you're actually going to just, I think, put down on a table and then put your fighters as they approach them. So there isn't really a map to hold these per se, but we'll see how that works as we get a little bit further into this. Now we have really can be characterized as marker heaven here. I mean, both of these 2 sheets are really the markers for the game, except we've also got the German fighters and lone bombers over here. So bomber fallen, you get a sense for kind of things that are going on. There's a lot of elements that are modeled in the game, and we'll talk about that as we look at the map. So I think the complexity rating of a 5 is legitimate, but they all look like fun things. I don't think there's a lot of really unnecessary chrome. I feel like, from what I can tell in the rules and looking at things, it feels like what you're going to be doing is playing the game, and everything that's modeled in here is going to be pretty fun. So there is a whole escort sequence. These are inbound vector, that kind of intercept sequence that you're going to be learning in terms of figuring out how to get the bombers and where you find them and what condition they're in, all those kinds of things. There is weather modeled in here, but most of these, again, are the counters that you're going to be dropping on the different aircraft to mark different status, like low ammo, abandoned, parachuted out over the channel, lost contact, and things like that, bomber fallen and all that. And then we have some more in here. Hit points are down here. There are 4 levels of pilots. So we have green, then there's, I think, regular, then veteran, and then ace is what they're, and those are the different markers for them. And here, of course, I think are the pilot markers that you're using. Different types of damage, so fuselage, wing, engine, cockpit, and things like that. And then some more counters here. Let's take a look at the decks. There are a lot of card decks that are really going to be the heart of, if you would, the AI in terms of how the German bombers and fighters are going to be reacting to you and getting the results for things like when you're shooting at the bombers, when you're going dogfighting with different fighters and things like that. Roughly, they fall into a bunch of different categories. We'll take a quick look at these, but there are so many, and I think basically the idea behind them is the same. If we look at a few of them, we'll get the rough idea. So we have 2 similar decks here. This is the Spitfire deck for head-on and tailing, and this is the Hurricane deck up here. And basically what you see as we look at these, this is the results for that type of particular combat. So if it's a Hurricane going head-on or tailing into fighters, German fighters, you're going to be using these here to determine hits and how things are going and whether you're hit and how many planes there are. And you basically cross-reference one of these, and each one of these little boxes gives you the result of that interaction between those planes. And they all work roughly the same way. So this is the Hurricane deck. If you're being tailed, you're going to be use this one, which will give you a different set of results. And then likewise, we have similar decks here for the Spitfires. So same wise, Spitfires being tailed, and then head-on for Spitfires gives you different results and kind of cross-indexing those. And then this is for your interaction against bombers. There's 2 of these, light and then medium, giving different results. And this again gives you the idea as to, depending on how many planes there are and things like that, the results, where you're coming in from. And you can start to get an idea too for the complexity of these, because whether you're approaching from the nose, starboard or port, approaching from the tail, you're going to get a lot of different results here as well. And then we have 2 different decks, one for light bombers and one for medium bombers. Then we have Luftwaffe Advantage and RAF Advantage. I confess I haven't quite learned how these work yet, but it looks like they're going to kind of give you the results of what happens if you have an advantage in a certain combat situation with fighters, and they're going to tell you this is the next step and where you go from here in terms of your intercept and that dogfight procedure. And then lastly, we have the reaction of escorts. If you come into escorts, what are the escorts going to do? And this gives you the results of those and kind of where you're positioning. And we can see here as well too, there's going to be high or low, so you're monitoring altitude as well. So there's a lot of things going on as one would expect of combatants in 3D space. Let's take a look at the player aids. Most of them are fairly self-explanatory. So we have pilot's player aid over here, raid vector sequence, and this again gives you an idea for the types of things you'll be doing in the game. Return to base sequence, so a little kind of, again, a mini game, if you would, or a mechanic to handle the end of missions as planes are coming back to the base. And then the interception sequence, which is kind of walking through a little bit of the information that you'll need from the rule book to kind of go through this phase and execute that phase of the game too. Then we have a couple of intercept charts. These red numbers are for success, so whether it's going to be a successful intercept of escorts, or I think this is whether the escorts intercept you perhaps. And then we have here the intercept the bombers. You're trying to intercept the German bombers, and you have to roll numbers higher than this. And again, altitude and the types of escorts matter in the success rolls, and you have a 12-sided die that's going to be rolled to see if you get numbers better than this to lead to whether the interception happens or not. And this is, again, part of that whole intercept sequence is a whole sequence of the game that you're learning through individual missions in the situation manual too. Then we have a very elaborate sequence of play that kind of, and some of them, again, you can go, you know, if this happens, then you're going there and going back and forth. So that way it kind of cycles around in here, but it very elegantly displays that. I think this is, oh, nope, it is two sides. So these are icon markers. Basically, a lot of those cards, as we saw, had a lot of different results. So if you're not sure what one of those is, then you can look it up here and it'll give you more information on those results too. So good. And we have a circle displays. I think this is when fighters, German fighters form circle formations, how you're going to break those down and how the combat and how the interception is going to work in those situations there. That's one-sided. And then we have a pilot roster pad. So we talked about the idea that you're going to have a squadron of pilots. There are 20 of them that you're going to have, and you can have 12 in the air at once. And so here you're keeping track of their patrols. You put the pilot name in there, kills of escorts and bombers, ace skills, and then other notes for these here too. And there's a big pad of these. I'm sure more available online if you want to print them out as well. And then here, these are just one of each, but these are the historical ones, one for the 54th Squadron and one for the 303rd. So these are if you want to use actual pilot names from the Battle of Britain here, from Battle of Britain. So very cool. There's a blank one there on the back if you want to use it there too, probably for extra pilots that come in. We are down to our maps per se, but they're more kind of situational displays, if you would. This one here is 17 by 24, and this is your advanced squadron display. I think it's on, oh, this is the squadron display. So there are some advanced rules perhaps that you're bringing in and would use this one for that one. But basically you can see this is going to be your 12 planes that are up in the air at any one time. This is where you kind of track what happens to them as they're going through their various missions. So really elegant display that's going to sit out just beside the main area in terms of what we're going to look at next. And this one here, 17 by 22. And it's got, I'll pull this out and open it up and show a zoomed out version of it here. It's got how you're going to be basically interacting with the bombers here on the interception map. And then the actual bomber runs, you put those big bomber cards off to the side and align your fighters in that way. But that one doesn't really need a map because it's just happening in the sky. We can see here too, there's a lot going on. This gets, I think, an idea of that 5 complexity because we've got a lot of different charts up here, you know. Elevator, engine damage, cockpit damage, rudder damage, what happens there, hospital, channel recovery, bailout, fate. I mean, all this stuff is cool, right? All these things are going to be kind of capturing the story and the history of your squadron as it goes through. But there are rules and elements and things to learn to be able to play these. And again, you work through that sequence to get there. Raid track over here. And we can see, again, this is going to be where the different aircraft and aircraft are situated as opposed to, you know, the escorts and your fighters and things like that, trying to jockey for position to try to get a run at the bombers. And you've got questions, I think, in a lot of times system. You're going to engage the fighters, run from the fighters, try to run from the fighters, go straight for the bombers. So I think a lot of fun tactical decisions when you add in that element of fighter escorts to this as well. We got fuel modeled, raid vector sequence icons here explained, escort suppression table. So just a lot of stuff here that's kind of modeled in the game. And we can see arrows going all different ways as the planes are going to be moving through. And there's rules for how they move ahead or behind. You've got sun factored in. There's a weather element too. So a lot of stuff going on. Definitely, you know, I would not let the complexity of this game scare you away, but you do want to be ready that you're going to have, you know, you're going to be playing a number of those missions as you build up to being ready to do a patrol. So you're going to go through all the sequence of play, then patrol, and then eventually get into that campaign. But really like this display. It's really clean, really well designed. I love the coloring of it too, because it's got that kind of sky feel to it. Lastly, we have some wooden blocks and markers in here too. So these are all provided with this here. And then our two 12-sided dice, red and blue for that part. And that brings us to the end. Skies Above Britain. Have you played it? Do you like this? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I know a lot of people really, really like this game. If you enjoyed this first look at the game. My very first unboxing that I did on the channel was Storm Above the Reich. So I'll put a link to that over there if you want to see me when I did this at the very beginning, like over 2 years ago. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good day.